Hello, welcome everyone. We just opened the gates, so you're going to start seeing the broadcast participant numbers going up as everyone is joining the webinar. We're up to 26. Awesome. Welcome everyone. Today we are talking about conversational selling, about how reps can stand out and sell more. So we've got people from Close.io, Chorus AI, and Drift on the webinar today. I'm going to have them all introduce themselves because they're going to do a hell of a lot better job than I could. So let's start with Joe.
Hey everybody, I'm Joe Caprio. I'm the VP Sales at Chorus.ai here in San Francisco. I'm really excited to be back with Drift and Close.io on another webinar. The topic is interesting to me. How can sales reps stand out? What do you need to do to be different, to be heard, to resonate, and to actually be a trusted advisor? This is what I do. This is my background, and I'm pumped to be here.
All right, Rob.
Hey everyone, this is Rob Perez. I'm building out the West Coast sales team here at Drift. We're a conversational marketing platform, also a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm happy to help you learn from things that I maybe haven't done so well in the past and learn from help you all learn.
And last but certainly not least, Mr. FD.
Hey everybody, this is Steli FD. No, I'm not coming or going to the gym. It's just very cold in the summer in Germany, unexpectedly. So this is the best I had to not freeze myself to death. I'm one of the co-founders of Close.io. Salespeople are my people, so whatever I can do to help them stand out and do their job better and help prospects accomplish their goals better, I'm all for it. So I'm super pumped to be part of the webinar today. This is going to be fun.
All right, and I'm Ryan Robinson. I'm standing in for Dave from Drift, who is out today. I'm going to try and live up to Dave's greatness. He's awesome. But today we are talking about how to stand out and sell more. So specifically how individual sales reps or founders who are still wearing that sales cap can be more effective. So to kick this conversation off, I want to hear from each of you guys. What is one specific achievable goal that a new sales rep or even a founder who's still doing sales should set for themselves as they start selling a new product? And you can take this. Whoever wants to hop in first, go for it.
I'll go first. So some of the advice that I'll give today is not going to be that exciting, but the type of advice that I love to give is advice that's timeless. You know, I'm asking myself, what was true 50 years ago? What will most likely be true 50 years from now? That's the type of advice or the type of principles I'm always interested in, especially when it comes to kind of a fast-moving world as the sales world is. So one simple thing that I'll throw out there when it comes to like standing out, especially in sales, is to actually work on the skill on your listening skills and become a much better listener than you are a talker, right? A lot of people that are in sales, we're constantly trying to become better communicators, which to most people translates into being better at talking, right? So we learn how to like craft our pitch better, how to negotiate better. We read all this and consume all this information, constantly trying to improve the way we speak and the way we communicate. But communication is really not just about talking. It is the two-way street between, you know, talking and listening. And I think that when it comes to listening and listening skills, it's one of these areas that because it's not that shiny, it's undervalued and therefore underdeveloped for most salespeople. And what I've found is that whenever I meet salespeople that have really honed and crafted and worked and improved and mastered their listening skills, these are the type of people that prospects love. People in general, we all love to feel truly listened to and truly understood, right? Ask yourself, when was the last time you had a conversation with somebody, especially a stranger, where you felt truly understood in the first conversation, in the first interaction? It's very, very rare, but when that happens, that type of a personal interaction really stands out to us, and that's the type of person prospects want to get back to because they feel they can trust this person. They feel like giving information, talking to that person is not a waste of time because there's somebody on the other side that truly cares, listens, and understands. And then when they recommend you to purchase their solution, product, or service, or to do something, you feel much better about doing that. So listening skills, working on those, improving those, I think that's an area where you can dramatically stand out from the crowd.
I like it. It's
Stelly,
something to make you minimum.
Huge, huge +1, Stelly. 100% agree. Lose the talk time battle, right? Like that's your point. Listen, you have 2 ears, you have one mouth. So Ryan asked, what could somebody do when they're starting to sell a new product? Like, what's a real attainable thing that they could focus on? You should lose the talk time battle. You should listen more than you speak. For me, it's interesting because I just joined a company. I just joined Chorus 60 days ago as their new head of sales. So I had to learn to sell a new product. And luckily, we were laughing about it before the webinar started. Rob Perez actually sold Chorus to me back when he worked at Chorus and I was at Insight Squared. So I bought Chorus, I was a customer, and then I joined here and now I sell it. And so I had to figure out, how could I sell this new product? So I just went through this. The number one thing that I think we're going to end up talking about again and again and again on this webinar is to be a consultant and not to be a salesperson. And Stelly, listen, right? That's step one of being a consultant, is actually listen to them and figure out what they need. But in order to be a true consultant, you have to be an expert, not just in what your product does, but in what your market needs your product for. So who are the people that buy your software or your product or your service? Who are the people that buy from you? What types of companies buy from you? What problems do they solve with your product? What goals do they accomplish with your product? So who buys it and why? And so what you need to do as soon as you decide to join a new company and sell a new product, you need to find a way to figure out who their target buyer is, what their use cases are, and then you need to be prepared to walk your prospects through that as a guide and a consultant. Figure out what the use cases are, figure out what the target buyers are, and get good at talking about those things.
For me, it's also something pretty similar, and it all comes down to the way that someone follows up with me. So I've been in a couple of buying cycles recently, and the folks that really have stood out are the ones that aren't just taking the easy way out and sending a simple follow-up that says, hey, I'm just checking in, or I'm circling back. I think I'm pretty allergic to those words now. So someone who actually takes the time to say, hey, I'm constantly thinking about your use case. I'm constantly thinking about how to make your business better. Here are some ideas that I've had after our call. I've done my homework on this, and I'm thinking that this is a way that we kind of roll it out. A lot of like we language in there. That's been incredibly helpful for me as a buyer, and that's something that I've been taking and spreading it out to my team. There's one other thing, which is game planning. So again, the original question was around how do you stand out? And so I think that I've noticed that my team's conversations have gotten a lot better recently as we've started to game plan more before a call. A lot of the time, there are some things that you can see on someone's website or based on what kind of competitors they've used in the past, where you can start to get a sense of what those objections might be that are going to come up. And if you discuss with a peer or a manager and say, hey, if this comes up, how should we attack this? I've noticed that the conversations have been a lot more fluid as a result.
I like that piece of advice too, because it's not something that has to take, 10, 20, 30 minutes before each call. Like, you can gather basic info in just a few minutes. I like it. All right, guys. So I want to shift this conversation a little bit over towards the lead generation side of things. So opening this one up again to each of you, what do you guys feel are some of the biggest challenges today that SDRs or people who are focused on lead generation are facing when they're trying to build pipeline? And how to overcome these challenges? Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on this one. When I ran the BDR team at Insight Squared, I would always do this exercise with them, where I would show them my inbox in the beginning of the day. These are the emails that came in overnight. There's 100 of them. What I now need to do is sort through 100 emails to find out if my CEO asked me for something or if a prospect or a customer needs me. So I clear out my email on the walk into work. At 2 o'clock, somebody cancels a meeting with me and I have an open half an hour. I have 100 new emails. And so the biggest challenge that you face as an SDR is that you are competing with hundreds of other SDRs that do the job in a really shitty way, that they don't do research, they don't qualify the prospect before they reach out, they don't personalize it, they don't tailor it, they just spam the universe. And then your buyer, me, has to deal with a ton of garbage emails. So breaking through the noise and getting an open and then getting a read when somebody opens the email, that's your biggest challenge. It's not competition, it's not budget, it's not authority, it's not any of those things. It's getting through the noise from people that are doing the same job as you, but they're doing it in like a really selfish, immature way.
Rob, Stelly, ways to stand out?
I mean, I think for me, it's one of the most important things is timing. So At the company that I'm at now, which is Drift, we've used a lot of intent signals to help us understand when someone might be more apt to buying, either based on them visiting our website or them taking a certain action on, downloading a white paper or something like that. And I think that's been incredibly helpful, because it allows you to be a lot more prescriptive in your message. You can say, hey, looks like this is top of mind for you. My job is to help get you the information you need. How can I help? Can we walk through how we might solve some of the problems that you're going through together? So I think that I'm definitely agreeing with what Joe's saying. My inbox is very similar, and so are the people that we're selling to.
Yeah, it's very hard to disagree with Joe and Rob. So I'm not going to be speaking up unless I disagree. Otherwise, I'm co-signing everything they say so far, and for the future of the webinar. For me, it comes to everything really. The source of all truth is going to be your customers, right? And so customer intimacy to me is the source to stand out and to really understand how to sell to them. So if you're a new SDR, you should be asking yourself, how can I increase and improve the intimacy level that I have and the true insight and understanding of our customers, right? How can I not just call and email and prospect them, think of them as leads, as numbers on a leaderboard or people that click a buy button, but how can I truly understand the people and how they think and how they communicate and what their work looks like and what their day and life looks like? So can you go out and have dinner with these people? Can you invite them to coffee? Can you spend time with them? Can you learn from them? So it's nice to come to a webinar like this or read blog posts or ebooks. I mean, we all are creating a ton of content trying to share and teach everything we know. That's a great source of information for a new SDR, but the best source of information is always going to be your customers. So when you talk to them, don't just sell to them, try to learn from them, right? If you send an email and they respond and you jump on a call, don't just instantly jump into the pitch. Take a second to ask, hey, your inbox is probably pretty full. What made my email stand out to you? Why did you choose to respond to my email? What about it was great? And vice versa, if you send an email to somebody and you see they open it but they never responded, maybe you want to give them a quick call and tell them, hey, this is not about selling you. I'm new in this business. I need 2 sentences of advice. I sent you an email, pretty sure you ignored it. Do you remember it? And if so, what made you decide this is not for me? If you could just answer that one question, I'll send you a $50 gift card for Starbucks or a big thank you. You really helped me learn how to do my job better. And people, if you ask for a sentence or two, it's harder not to give you advice than to give it to you. So learn from the customers how to do your job better, how their world looks like, and how to play a valuable role in that world. If you spend as much time as possible, right, you're really immersing yourself in the world of the customer, it's going to be easy for you to start standing out and do the job better, because almost nobody who competes with you does this, right? They all stay in this generic, nebulous way of trying to understand who they're selling to versus you going the extra mile and really creating unique insights.
Stelly, you said one thing that I just absolutely love, and it's take an active interest in your prospect's business. So one of the best reps I've ever worked with, his name is Ben Solari. He's over at Data Robot right now, which is also an amazing company. But he would take time before every call to learn about the company he was about to work with and learn about the person that he was about to meet. And then he would spend like 5 minutes in the beginning of every single meeting to understand, what is it that your company does? This is as far as I could get based on your website. Who else is in that space? How are you different? How did you build your sales team? How do you go to market? And he was like genuinely just a student of sales, and he just wanted to know this. And what would happen is every single time he would just build like a really stellar relationship, because the person on the other end realized this kid cares, right? And he wants to know about me, and he's listening to me. To your point about not just doing an interrogation, he was asking questions because he wanted the answer, not just because he was like supposed to check down a list of questions.
Yeah, plus one for me on showing a genuine interest. When I started about 5 months ago in this role, there was a rep named Mike Castillo. Hopefully everyone's not madly rushing to message all the people that Joe and I are mentioning now. But it was amazing to me that after a call was over, I wasn't entirely sure if that person was speaking to a prospect, a friend, or actually even a girlfriend in some cases. But showing a genuine interest in saying, like, is this something we can solve together? Is it worth it for us to solve this now? Allow the other person to open up so much more and just have a genuine conversation.
So there are a lot of things bubbling up to the surface here. So, genuine conversation, first of all, problem solving mentality, conversational, right? Like you're not just talking to a wall. You're not just trying to get all of your check boxes answered. And Rob, I want to ask this question because it's very closely related to what you guys are doing at Drift. So, it wasn't that long ago that, everyone who was a guru in sales was preaching scalable, only do scalable things. But looking at your product today and where a lot of the trends are going in sales and marketing, why is it important to shift over to this one-on-one style conversation with your leads? And then the follow-on to that is, how do you begin to scale something like that, and if that's possible?
Yeah, so I think that for us, the number one thing is it's just communicating with our prospects. When I kind of mentioned it earlier, but the main thing is timing. So if someone's visiting one of our pages, like for instance, a high intent page, like the pricing page, or they spend 45 seconds on a customer case study, there's something that's going on. So it's been really helpful for us to be notified as soon as someone is on one of those pages, so that we can take care of them right there and then. So I think that it's hard to imagine where else I'd be spending my time if I was a rep. For most of the people that I talk to, the alternative is doing more cold outbound emails and such. So it hasn't really been much of an issue of scaling. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Joe, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, your question, Ryan, just kind of sparked something in me there. It was like, how do you make time to do things at scale when they're super personal in nature? It's just indicative of the way that tech has gone in the last 10 years. So when things like mass amounts of email or like huge amplification of outbound efforts became available, what we did as an industry is we said, like, this is an amazing weapon that we never had before. It's firepower I never had. So I'm going to send 100,000 emails a week. I'm going to send 1 million emails a month. I'm just going to do like massive amounts of like automation. And, in the same thing with like SEO and like inbound, all of a sudden these distribution networks were available to us that were never available before. And so we abused them. That manifested in the problem I was talking about earlier, where it's like, I get 100 emails every night and then another 100 emails by lunch, and 90 of them are junk. And so what we have to do right now is evolve. Like, you just have to evolve. We evolved when we started using SEO and we started using like outbound email. And now it's time to evolve again and say, can we take advantage of the fact that we're able to widen our funnel? But can we also do it in a way where we don't just like make it super, super wide and have the same spout at the bottom? So like, let's not fool ourselves and say every single lead is a good lead. Every single conversation is a good conversation. How do we highlight the ones that are worth working on that could actually benefit from us, and then pay more attention to them than we do the generic like masses?
Yeah, I'll double click real quick before we move to the next one, because I just had a call earlier today with somebody, and he asked me, Stelly, you recommend in the beginning when you're prospecting, you send out emails, to start with a really small amount every day. Why? Why can't we have 45,000 emails in our lead database? Why can't I just send out 4,000 a day, right? Why should I do 40 or maybe even 25? And I asked him, well, first of all, if we take your question to full conclusion, why not just send out 45,000 emails at once, right? That would be the most scalable way of doing this. Let's just send everything at once. Well, there's two things that can happen. Either your email is terrible, which means nobody will open it. The people that open it click the spam button, and now you're in trouble. Or if your email is amazing and your timing for all these people is impeccable, you're going to be overwhelmed. There's no way you're going to respond in a timely manner, set up calls with all these people in a timely manner. So in both cases, doing this at scale in one big step is a terrible idea. And he was like, I never thought about it this way. I'm like, all right, okay. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about it. Yeah, at scale, makes sense when scaling makes sense, when what you do really works, it's the right time, the right person. And then people never think about the entire experience, right? It's not just about an email or a phone call or an ad. That ad or that phone call leads to a longer call, a meeting in person, a pilot. It leads to an entire journey. Like, can you really scale this, in the tens of thousands per rep? Probably not if you're doing a good job, right?
I want to get a little bit more tactical on a few of the things you guys just mentioned here. So, and this is particularly applicable to companies that don't have a ton of inbound leads coming in every single day. So for those sales reps or even founders who are doing sales out there that don't have inbound leads to occupy all their time, right? So Joe, they don't have 100 emails in their inbox every single morning. What should those people be focusing their efforts on when it comes to outbound selling? So what's the number one most impactful activity that you should be doing today?
Yeah, I think it's going to sound harder than it is, but I think you should be able to anticipate the people that actually need your product. So you anticipate the companies and the human beings that need your product, and those are the ones you go outbound to. And you can do that in a variety of ways. You can buy intent data, you can buy signal data. Like I always bring up DataFox because they're amazing. But what you need to do is you need to figure out, like, what is it that I solve? What is it that I provide? And what kinds of companies would need that? And what experiences would those companies be going through that would show me that they need what I have? So you think of the events that occur that dictate a need for your product or service, and then you go looking for those events, and then those are the people that you go outbound to.
One other signal to add on to that, agree with Joe's point, is looking at when you've made someone wildly successful as a customer, look for the lookalikes. So who else with the same exact title in the same industry in other areas, or where else are these people that I can help? That's been incredibly helpful.
And then what I'll add to that is, if you have any successful customers right now, ask for referrals, right? But ask it in the right way. So don't just go, most salespeople are really wishy-washy on the referral, right? Because they just got a customer. Usually they don't want to ruin the relationship. It just went so well, right? So they'll ask in a very throwaway way, hey, if you ever think of somebody, we always appreciate it, goodbye, right? Or they might ask, and if they get a little bit of a pushback of like, I'm not sure who else I know that I really respect that I would want to benefit from this, they go, well, all right, that's cool. What I used to teach and what I've done myself, hundreds of times very, very successfully, is to nudge people and tell them, hey, I could spend most of my time servicing my customers and making sure that they are incredibly successful, or I can spend most of my time prospecting, right? If I think it would benefit you more if I could service and focus on that, but that only works if my successful customers help me get more successful customers. That in general, does that make sense to you? Right? I would make it part of the deal. And then when they bought, if they ever got to that point, I would ask them, hey, I don't need hundreds of names. Just think of one or two people you really respect that you think should be aware that this solution exists and you think would benefit from a relationship with somebody like me. And then if people didn't know who to bring up, I would nudge them a little bit when they would be going like, I don't know, I need to think about it. We'll go, let's just think about it right now. So it's not a to-do list. It's not another thing you have to do sometime today. Let's take 3-4 minutes and think about somebody, just one person. And you'd be surprised, just by pushing people a tiny little bit, out of 10 people that would say I have to think about it, 5 would give you a name, right? Now, the more crucial thing than just getting the name and making the intro happen is to close the feedback loop. So if you ever close a referral, right? If you ever get to the point where a referral becomes a customer, the first thing I would do, I would always go, hey, who is responsible for this relationship happening? And people always be like, you? No, who put us together? Who put us in touch? Ryan. Okay, do me a favor. And I'll do the same thing. Write Ryan a quick thank you note. And I'll do the same so he knows we both appreciated that connection. If you close the positive feedback loop, the moment Ryan gets a few emails saying, hey, thank you so much for putting me in touch with Stella, this was amazing, 9 out of 10 times Ryan will think, who else do I know I can put in touch with Stella, since putting people in touch with Stella seems to be something that creates value in my network and therefore value for my reputation, my name, my brand, my friends, right? So this is an old school thing, but if you do it right, it can be incredibly useful. Again, it's not going to scale to like an ever increasing number of thousands and thousands of referrals, but think about it. If you just get 1 or 2 really good referrals from your best new customers, that's pretty amazing, right? You're going to get, because a lot of these people will be similar to the customers you like best, the customers that are most successful, and therefore you're going to have a good engine of high quality people to talk to.
So guys, sticking to our theme of tactical here today, one thing that we all know is that sales reps cannot afford to waste their time on people who are tire kickers, right? Those that are just price shopping, they're window shoppers, whatever you want to call them. They don't really have the intention to buy anytime soon, but they'll keep you on the phone, or they'll keep bouncing back and forth over email, asking questions for as long as you allow them to. So this question is for each of you guys again. Signs, qualities, characteristics, actions that reps out there use to sort of identify and differentiate between the hot opportunities they have versus the tire kickers who aren't.
I have an idea. Why don't you just ask? Why don't you just ask the prospect how serious they are and how imminent their need is? And if you're genuine about why you're asking, they'll answer. So if you're asking because you just want their money, then, you know, you're like the car salesman when somebody shows up on the lot and your first question is, what's your current payment? And they can see right through you. You're just asking because you want to know how much budget they have. But if your genuine desire is to help and you ask, are you here because you have an active project you're trying to solve? And if so, I can help you. Or are you here because you're trying to educate yourself on this product or service so that maybe later you'll have an active project? Or are you here because my BDR tricked you and you shouldn't be here, right? And if you genuinely ask the prospect where they are, also, I really hate the idea that there are buyers and non-buyers, and those are the two buckets that we put people in, good opportunities versus tire kickers. There is that third bucket that we forget about, which is somebody who is a genuine prospect and could buy from you in the future, but maybe doesn't move immediately through your sales process as quickly as you want them to. So I think there are three buckets. Tire kickers and time wasters, fine. Let's be polite and let's end the meeting. Hot buyers with an active project, let's make it our mission to support them and make them successful. And then that third bucket is somebody who's there to genuinely learn. They have a real curiosity about what it is that you do. Give them a little bit of time, give them some education, give them what they need so that they can, inform themselves. And then over time, they'll come back to you. So my answer is, how do you spot a hot buyer from a tire kicker? It's like, just be genuine in your desire to help all three people and just ask them what they're here for, to buy something, to educate themselves, or because they ended up in the wrong room.
Yeah, so for me, once I've understood kind of what the other person's looking to accomplish, I ask one question, which is done pretty well in the past, which is, sounds like there's a lot on your plate with this main goal that you're looking to solve. What are the ways that you're looking at solving it? And depending on that answer, I know how serious they are. If they haven't really thought out a process for how to make a decision and how they're going to evaluate different solutions to solve that problem, then I kind of like segment folks based on that answer. My favorite conversations to have are ones where there's at least one other competitor in the picture. I think Joe was actually sharing this with me the other day, but I know that Chorus has done a lot of research on win rates in situations where there is at least one additional competitor. It's actually significantly higher than in situations where someone is looking at just one product. Kind of helps us out, folks that are a little bit further along in an evaluation process. But that one for me has been great. And then one thing I'd add to that is, in those situations where I have a competitive, where I understand that it is a competitive situation, I always love to understand if I'm going first or second.
I love that. All right, so I'll give a third version of the same question, because that's we all come from the same place. The question that I like to ask is, once I am convinced that there might be a mutual fit, I would always ask the prospect or the potential customer, hey, it seems that there's a mutual fit here. Let me ask you, what would it take for you to become a customer of ours? Like, from where we are to where we need to go, what is missing? What are all the steps we have to take? And the important part here would always be to not just stop at some point and assume the rest, but really follow up with questions until we arrive at a virtual close, a time where they say, and then I would buy, right? So oftentimes they might say, I have to go back, we have to evaluate this, we have to do a pilot. And we don't like to keep asking questions. So most salespeople eventually will go, that sounds great. Go back to the team, evaluate this, do a pilot. And then in our minds we go, and then they'll buy. But I don't like to do that, right? So I'd go, okay, once we've done these 3 steps, are we in business? No. Then you'd still have to go through procurement. Okay, and now? Well, now then you would have to go through legal. Okay, and are we in business then? No, no, no. Then you have to talk to my grandmother, and she has to read your palm and your future, right? And are we then in business? Yes, then we would be in business, right? And that gives me a really good roadmap. Red flags might pop up, or even just moments of truth, which I love in sales, where they expose that they don't have an intent to buy, or there's some really big problem in either the way you sell or the way your product is constructed or the way they buy. That's just a mismatch that was not easy to find in the beginning. The only other thing that I'll add to this, sometimes you have buyers or prospects or people that you talk to that are missing focus. They could be really in the market and really, really interesting to buy, or not at all. That's irrelevant. Some people are just a little bit all over the place. They lack clarity and clear priorities. And I find that salespeople often really, really struggle with those people, because what happens is that these people will have lots of questions, and the salesperson will try to answer those questions. But because they're all over the place, the salesperson will ping pong and run around trying to address all these disjointed questions. 40 minutes go by, the time is over, and now there's a feeling of overwhelmment and lack of clarity on, what's this good? Did I answer all the questions? Where does this lead us? So I think it's really important to, when you spot this, when the prospect is really going back and forth in all kinds of directions with the questions, to stop the conversation and take control of it, and to say, hey, I want to be respectful of your time. I see that we have only 30 minutes more to go. You have tons of questions. Let's step back and make sure that we address the most important questions and that we get those out of the way first, right? So if you think about everything you need to know, what is an absolute must-have, right? And you basically force or empower the prospect to think through what is really crucial here. Because they can get lost, especially with some technical products. You might answer a nice-to-have question, and that leads them to another question, and then leads them to another question. Now you spend 30 minutes answering questions that are really not a big deal to them, and they don't really care that much, right? And that's kind of very exhausting and counterproductive. So make sure to stay in control of the conversation, help your prospect prioritize, and stay focused on what truly matters, and address all the nice-to-haves much later on, and not on kind of the first few calls.
So guys, I want to go back to sort of our original theme here of the webinar. How do you stand out when you're reaching out to someone new and you want to sell to them eventually? So this kind of goes with the baked assumption that you've already qualified them. You know that they're a strong potential prospect for your business. They have what appears to be the need for your product. So, you're trying to reach out, whether it's over email or calling, leaving voicemails. How many times should you guys follow up trying to reach a prospect for the first time before you kind of write them off and move on?
I'll take this first. It's 37.9 times. And this is throughout all industries, all countries, and all times, right? So I'm in some parts, or for some people, I'm known as the follow-up guy, right? And so here's what I'll say, which is true for everything we've said so far. Probably it all depends, right? It depends on who you are, who your prospects or your customer is, and many other factors. But in general, I would say, because this is not a satisfying answer to most people, I'll tell you that when it's a cold relationship, I honestly believe that there is a limit to how much follow-up and follow-through you probably are. Your social account can afford you to do without really burning bridges and really kind of destroying value in the world. So some people say it's 8 follow-ups. Some people say it's 4. Really, it's partially part of like your comfort zone, who you're trying to sell and their comfort zone, and so on and so forth. But it's definitely more than once, right? If you prospect and you just ping me once, it's never going to work. You're going to have to follow up and follow through a few times, and even just for the simple reason that timing is so crucial, and you have to assume that you'll never get timing, or very rarely will get timing perfectly right with everybody at the first time, right? So you probably have to be somewhere between 4 and 8 times. I'd love to hear more data on this if anybody on the panel has that. When it comes to warmer relationships, people you have talked to, had calls with, had demos, had conversations in person and meetings in person, my personal follow-up philosophy, if you can afford it, right? Or if it's worth the value that the relationship represents is high enough, my personal follow-up philosophy is follow up forever, until you get to a result. Yes is good, no is good, maybe is where value is going to go to die, right? It's that maybe zone that's really, really dangerous. I would always just assume that they're busy when they don't get back to you. And I would assume that it's my job to champion the conversation to its logical conclusion. Get it until they have a moment where they feel emotionally and spiritually and strategically ready to respond to you and tell you what's going on in their world. And I've seen tremendous results, not just myself. I have hundreds and hundreds of case studies of people that follow up 16 times, 28 times, 13 times, way more than they were comfortable with. And the response was, thank you so much for being persistent. Now we're ready to go. Let's talk. And they closed massive, massive deals just by being a bit more persistent than the other guy. So that's kind of my general advice on the follow-up and follow-through.
My take has always been that if you have a question on how many times you should follow up, your question should actually be, why am I not driving value? So if you want to know, is it 10 emails, is it 20 emails, is it 30 emails? I think you're worried about the wrong thing. The right thing to worry about is like, are you genuine in your effort? And do you actually think you could help that person? And if so, right, be honest, be articulate, but just be genuine, be real. Tell them why you're reaching out to them and make it be a real reason. And if you do it that way, then I don't think you have a problem.
Yeah, one thing I'd add to that is I think that one of the problems that I see with some oncoming reps is that they'll get an inbound lead and work that one account, that one contact and send them 10 or 11 emails. But there is a notion of also outbounding on that inbound account. And so getting multiple perspectives is something that I find is incredibly helpful. For instance, if there's one person that was initially responding to you, and there's another contact that could also be a part of the conversation, framing the email as, hey, I've heard one perspective with a solution like this. It would be really helpful to get your perspective to make sure that your voice is at the table. That can be really helpful to get the response. And then once you've gotten some traction with that other person, I've gone ahead and said, hey, to the original person that wasn't responding, I have some time on the calendar. I know that you had originally shown some interest. There's, this is picking up traction. We should join the conversation together. Only other thing I would add is LinkedIn has been a phenomenal method. As soon as you can add someone on LinkedIn and start to form a conversation, that's been really helpful. So I think that LinkedIn has made some changes to where response rates are a lot higher on something like InMail. They've made it look like an instant message. And I think that it's permissible to send 3 or 4 messages in a row, even daily, if you're adding value, if you want to see where someone's at, great method to use.
Awesome answers all around. I like it. So guys, I've got one more question here that I've prepared, and then we're going to jump over to the Q&A section after this. So I've been seeing a lot of really good questions pop into the Q&A. If you want to get your question in, please do so now. We're going to try and answer them in order. So there's a little Q&A tab that you should see on your screen there. If you hit that, ask your question. The more specific you can get, the better. But I want to throw a scenario at you guys first. So whoever wants to take a crack at this first, go for it. But the scenario is you're a sales rep for a product that's in a pretty competitive space. You've got a lot of leads that come in from either a free trial, maybe they downloaded an ebook, they signed up to get some pricing information, they've done some sort of signal that indicates interest. And the next step in your sales process, and I'm thinking this is something that a lot of people here today have experienced, is picking up the phone and calling them, checking in on how that trial's going, what they thought of the ebook, what pricing information that you can give them. So when you're in this scenario, you're about to pick up the phone and call this qualified lead. How do you think about starting this conversation with them, and maybe what your goal should be on the other side of that conversation?
I can take that. I think it's so simple. Like I'm always amazed when people are like challenged by this. The reason you're getting in touch with them, and hopefully you get in touch in a very quick turnaround time, right? The quicker you get in touch when somebody came in and showed interest, the better your chances to reach them and make a connection, start a conversation. And why should you want to do that? What's so valuable about that? Well, they're showing interest. They're not an expert in your product. It's very unlikely they're going to spend the next 10 hours reading every page you have, every FAQ article, every blog post, trialing your product and becoming a black belt and knowing all the answers to all their questions that they have. And if they do, it might not be the best use of their time. Maybe talking to somebody like you hopefully can get them to the answers they need much faster. So that's the whole deal. Like when you call somebody, if you get in touch with somebody, the basic premise is you seem to have a problem or looking for a solution. You are interested in what we have to offer. I'm an expert in what we have to offer. So I'm getting in touch to answer all your questions, to save you time, to help you make a better decision quicker, right? That's it. And then you can ask some very, basic questions at the beginning. Number one, what's the number one goal that you have with signing up for a trial? What are you trying to get out of this? And then there's other basic questions. How did you hear about us? What made you sign up today, this very moment, versus a few weeks back or at some point in the future? Why did you take action right now? But then the basic premise is just genuine interest in who they are, what they need, and offering you as a source of knowledge and a source to create clarity and allow them to get to an answer faster if this is really for them and worth their time and money or not.
Yeah, I think that highlighting their current state, highlighting their desired state or potential desired state is great on an initial touch. So saying to someone, hey, I've done my homework. I know that I can help you. I just talked to somebody that's in your industry and we spent 25 minutes together and just, built out whatever you're going to build out for them, and actually just walk them through what that would look like would be really, really helpful. We do this for all of our free signups, and it's really valuable.
I'm just going to go more meta than tactical on this one. Your goal or your desire or your intent on every interaction you have with a prospect or a customer should be the same every single time. It's just to understand like where they are as a business or where that person is in their career and where they want to be. So why did they take the trial? Why did they do the demo request? Why were they on your pricing page? Like, why did they reach out to you? Why did they come inbound on Drift, right? What are they actually trying to accomplish? And if you make it your priority to understand what they want, and then you make it your goal to help them accomplish what they want, whether it's by buying your software or by not buying your software, if you're genuine in the craft, I want to understand what they need and I want to help them get what they need, that's when you'll be successful.
Awesome. All right, guys, let's jump over to the Q&A. There are a ton of awesome questions. Please keep them coming. We've got another 18 minutes or so to get through as many of these as we can. So the first question I want to go with actually jumps back to something we talked about at the beginning of this webinar. And it's, being a better listener, using the 2 ears more than the one mouth you have, right? So how do you, getting a little bit more tactical now, how do you go and improve your listening skills? And maybe this is for someone who is also managing reps. How do you get your team to improve their listening skills?
I'm sorry that I have to answer this one. This is what Chorus does. So whether you use a call recording vendor like Chorus, or if you just use the recording functionality that already exists in, like Zoom or GoToMeeting, the way to do this is to record and then watch. And, you'll cringe, you'll suffer, you'll hate yourself for it, but just watch yourself. The truth is in the video. And if you could watch a couple of your sales calls and not hate yourself, it's probably because the prospect and customer is doing all the talking. So it's the only way to fix it. The only way to fix this is to do live film reviews.
Yeah, so heavy +1 for Joe on that one. So we use Chorus internally, and I think that what's interesting is a lot of the problem comes from self-awareness. And so I'll ask someone right after a call, how do you think that went? And a lot of the times they say, hey, it went good. I heard all the right words. And if you go back and just point out a certain part of the call where someone was giving a detailed answer as to what they were looking to accomplish, what they were looking to do within the next month or so, and you have a rep just cut them off, it's extremely valuable to have that information. And so pointing that out, making them self-aware, and then continuously helping them progress is great.
All right, next question. This one's from Nathan. This is actually, something that's been relevant to me and my history as well. Were you guys ever scared the first time that you started making cold calls and then maybe getting more tactical on something like that? How do you overcome the initial fear, or maybe performance anxiety, something like that, fear of rejection? How do you start to overcome that when you're relatively new, picking up the phone, making calls?
Yeah. So yes, right. Some people might have a hard time believing it, especially with people that have been in sales for a long period of time, like Joe, Rob, and myself have been, right? But the truth is, absolutely, the first time I had to make calls, of course I had anxiety. Of course I was afraid, but not as much afraid of making the call as of not making it, right? So whatever it was that motivated me, I picked up the phone and made some calls. In terms of practical tips, well, first I'll give two tips. One is really understanding that, that fear or that nervousness that you have, the difference between, the feeling of nervousness and the feeling of excitement is really just context. It's really just the way you think about it. If you tune into the physical emotion, it's very, very similar, if not identical. So one tip that I have is whenever you're nervous is to let that energy out. Maybe speak a little bit more animated, maybe speak a little higher volume, maybe stand around, but instead of trying to contain the emotion and struggle with it, just let it out. Just be a bit more dramatic, right? Just be a bit louder. And when you let that energy out, it'll calm you down and it'll allow you to really focus on the other person more so than dealing with your own emotions. And the other thing I'll say is reprogramming the goal or the expectation of trying to be successful at every call, right? So a super old school sales trick that I learned that never let me go, and I've been using it in one way or another forever, is to just reprogram what I'm trying to use as a metric of progress, right? So instead of making the first few calls and having the aim to schedule a demo, let's say, right? And then the first few calls I get are all rejections, and I feel like I'm failing more and more, which only gonna make this a more terrible and terrifying experience. I would just ask myself, all right, I don't know how many calls it takes to succeed, but let's just aim to get 20 or 30 rejections today, right? And let's just say that if I get 20 or 30 rejections, I might get lucky and maybe I even deserve it, and I'll get a few demos scheduled. And then I would just, take a piece of paper, add like 30 boxes, and every time I got a rejection out of a conversation, I would check off that box. And now that would be a way for me to progress towards my goal. Eventually, when you know your metrics and your conversion rate, maybe that you can actually tune this in to get to the end goal that you want. But just reprogramming in a way where emotionally, when somebody rejects you or hangs up on you, it doesn't feel like wasted time. It doesn't feel like you failed as a human being, but it feels like a small, tiny bit of progress towards your greater goal. I think that can go a long way.
So one thing I would say for reps, the most important thing that I look for as a manager are not the people that get it right the first time. It's the way that they react once they mess up the first time. So I started my career at LinkedIn, and I had a week of really, really good training. And then on day 6, they said, start getting on the phones. And I was absolutely abysmal. So bad. My team, they basically gave up on me. And so the one thing I remember communicating to my manager is, hey, I know this is not acceptable, but what you can expect is that I'll get better and that this won't break me. And that having that attitude and being okay with failure is okay as long as you're able to bounce back up. And I know that folks talk about that a lot, but it's actually really hard to do in practice because it's really uncomfortable to fail and to fail in front of others.
Two things help me. You're never going to get over the stage fright, and you shouldn't, right? It means you don't care. So the fear means that you care. You could play a game with your coworkers and your peers, right? Like we used to celebrate getting hung up on. We used to celebrate calls that didn't go well because it means that you pushed it further than you might have pushed it. So like take solace, like have camaraderie, like work with your team and make sure that like you should not be embarrassed if a call goes poorly. Like you should not feel exposed around your teammates if a call goes poorly. So make sure you have a good, productive culture. The other one is I always tell my salespeople, everyone you talk to, just pretend it's either your aunt or your uncle. Okay. There's a built-in layer of respect, right? But your family, it's okay to disagree. Like, hey, uncle, I read that book too. That's not the read that I got from it. So you're allowed to disagree. You're allowed to push the envelope. You're allowed to kind of, go hand-to-hand combat, but there's respect because you're pretending that it's your aunt or your uncle. It might help you with your stage fright too.
So Rob, the next question comes in from Ryan Creemore, and I think it's pretty related to what you just said in your last answer. What are some of the tactics or maybe questions that a sales leader can ask during the hiring process that kind of gauges the sense of whether a rep will have the capacity, ability to have that empathy, to have that drive, and sort of like admit, I'm failing in some cases, but I'm going to learn. I'm going to get better. How do you test for that during the interview process?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the hardest things for me to suss out in an interview, because I don't think that there's a surefire way of doing it. And I'm still thinking through the best way to do that. But as of right now, it's been asking people, what's the most consistent feedback you've heard from a coach, from a parent, from someone else? And so I'll let them speak to that. And then my follow-up question to that is, and how have you reacted to that? How did you feel? Did you feel that that information was fairly communicated? Did you feel that they were right? Did you feel like they were wrong? And based on that answer, I have a good sense of how coachable the other person is, because for me, coachability and bouncing back go hand in hand. So I've had a number of people that I basically like walk out after that question, because there's they, in some cases they'll get defensive and say, well, I feel like the person was being really rude. And when you dig into that, in some cases directness may be confused with being rude. And so we're in a performance game, and if someone isn't willing to take really direct feedback, then we're not going to get anywhere. So answer to that question is, I'm still working on it, but that's my number one question.
No, Rob, you're totally right. With any skill that you want to test for in interviews, it's like at the end of the day, you're going to have to make a judgment call. So what I think about is like, what are the skills that I want to test for? What are the attributes, the characteristics that I want to try and hire for? And then what are a handful of conversations that might reveal if this person has what I want them to have? And then I'm just going to make sure that I've got it in my back pocket, that I either want to talk about the most, constructive piece of criticism a coach ever gave you, or how come your last company did an IPO, or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just going to have a handful of questions or conversations that might help me figure it out. And I'm going to find a way to bring them up in the interview. And then I'm going to have to make a judgment call to figure out if they have it or not.
One thing to add to that is, like, whenever you can, just throw them the ball, right? So you can talk about things in theory, and you can get a pretty good sense of people. But I've had many experiences where when we talked intellectually about their past experiences, their answers were just perfect. But then when I threw them the ball, they melted right in front of me, right? They had a nervous breakdown. So one thing I always like to ask is, hey, how do you think this conversation has gone so far, right? What do you think is my assessment of you based on the questions I asked, based on my reactions to things that you said? That gives you a pretty good sense of like what their self-awareness is, and also what their willingness is to be open about themselves and critical versus trying to, protect their true opinion. And the other thing is telling them, hey, what was the last thing you were selling? All right, pitch me, sell me that product. Let me be a little bit of a critical prospect. I might be a bit more uncomfortable than your average nice prospect was. And then give them one tiny bit of feedback, something that I feel like is easy to adjust to or improve on, and have them do it again. And just see, can they adjust? Can they deal with that? But even then, I'll double click on what Rob said. I have actually given up on the hope. I'm not as good of a man as Rob is. And I've always been telling people, you're never going to hear me say the words, I just hired a great salesperson, because I just don't know. I always just assume it's going to take a few months for me to truly get to know somebody and really know what their performance is like, in good as well as in bad days. But if you can't throw them the ball and see, sometimes magic happens in front of you when you do that.
So guys, this next question I've seen asked in a couple of different forms throughout the webinar. So today, is it more effective to do lead generation through cold email or cold calling? And I know this is one of those it depends kinds of answers, but maybe you could start with some use cases where one might be more relevant than the other.
I'll take this because it depends, right? If you like that answer or not. So I'll give you, the question is, what communication channels do your customers live in, are very responsive in, or not? Give you two simple examples. If you're trying to get in touch with CTOs of Fortune 500 companies, cold calling their office line, probably not going to work that well, right? Because they're not used to picking up their desk phone if they even have one. If you're selling to, coaches of football teams in colleges and high schools, and you happen to have their cell phone because it's publicly available information, you might have an incredibly good time calling them, cold calling them, because they're used to picking up the cell phone when there's a number they don't recognize, because they get calls all day from parents of people they don't recognize. And they might be much worse in terms of their responsiveness when it comes to cold emails, right? Because they're not at their computer all day long. I've had a case, I know a startup that's selling to doctors, and they had an incredibly successful campaign sending a fax to doctors' offices. It was mind-blowing. I didn't realize that people still use fax machines, right? So I don't know. I don't think there's a universal answer to this, what's better, cold calling, cold emailing. It absolutely depends on your prospect. That's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, Sully, because it's one of my pet peeves when I go into a forum and someone just, unequivocally says, this is the best way to do it. It really, really depends on your business. Ways that I've done it in the past is I go to if you have other sales representatives at the company, go to the top person and say, where did you get your deals from last month? Was it calling? Was it emailing? If you're a founder and you don't have those resources, leverage competitors, leverage other folks that have sold into those audiences and learn about what they've done.
This is like that clickbait article garbage that we get on LinkedIn every day about
cold calling is there.
Yeah. Right. Look, I recommend products that work. I recommend outreach. Every time this comes up all the time, and I recommend outreach every single time. This is baked into their product. They will give you reply rates. They will give you success rates on their sequences. Build a sequence that's email only. Build a sequence that's call only. Figure out which ones are working for you. If you're small or you don't want to buy outreach, you don't want to spend money on a tool, then take a piece of paper and a pencil out and just keep track of your attempts and keep track of your outcomes, and then figure out which one is better for you and decide if it means you go all in on one or the other, or if you just weight your cadences more heavily towards one or the other. But this is pure laziness to just keep pontificating on whether or not calls or emails are better for you. Just track what you do and then answer the question, which one is more effective?
All right, guys, we've got just a couple of minutes left. This is going to be our last question. So if I have a product, this one's from Christian, if I have a product with a longer sales cycle, do you have any tips on how to shorten that? And, specifically, maybe there are multiple decision makers in this buying process. How do you facilitate a quicker buy?
I have a weird question on this one. Sorry to answer a question with a question, but I've always heard you need to sell more. You need more revenue. There are only a couple of things you could do. More at the top of the funnel, higher win rate, or higher ASP. They're the only ways to get more revenue. And then some people say, or a shorter sales cycle. I don't get that one. I don't know how a shorter sales cycle is actually the measurement that you're chasing right now. You're going to need deals this month. You're going to need deals next month. You're going to need deals the month after. So if all of your deals, your sales cycle is X, why do you care? So there are ways that you can shorten your sales cycle. I just question, before we go hunting for shorter sales cycles, I just question if that's the right measurement instead of higher win rates.
So I like that point. I would say that, it depends on if you want sales to be profitable or if you just care about top level revenue, right? Because if it takes me 10 years to close a $10 customer lifetime value deal, we would both agree that that's probably matters a lot versus if it took me 1 minute to close a $10 deal. I think so. I think that this really matters more and more when it comes to financing sales, more so than top level revenue. You're right. Closing a deal this month or next month, the grand scheme of things should not make that big of a difference in terms of how much revenue we're generating. The other thing though is that I think that it's really hard for salespeople, if they're not in enterprise sales, if they're not used to really long sales cycles and the return is not very, very high in terms of revenue and profit, I think that salespeople really struggle to stay patient. Even if it takes 3 months or 4 months to close an SMB deal, even if it was worth it and profitable, I think that just salespeople struggle to stay in the deal for that long of a period of time without losing patience or excitement, without being soul crushed. This is being postponed to another week. And that week they thought it's going to happen. It's not happening yet. It's happening in 2 weeks. Like that can just be psychologically, I think, really tough for people. But I hate all the hackety-hack ways to shorten the sales cycle. Oh, run a promotion. Or even worse, I hear this all the time where salespeople will actually say, that even today, will actually tell a customer or prospect, hey, it's the end of the quarter. I need to hit my numbers. I know that you want to buy next month. Can you put your credit card in right now? And I'm going to make sure that you're, oh my God, like I want to like kill myself and then take them with me and jump over out of the window when that happens. Because again, this is zero value to the customer. Like this is such a selfish proposition. I need to make my numbers. Please put in the credit card. I don't know. It just seems like a heartbreaking proposition. So to me, the best way to create urgency is to understand what is urgent to them right now anyways. What's important and urgent in their business, and can your product or service help them accomplish that urgent goal? So how can you tie in what you do to what's truly important and urgent in their life versus seeing these two things as disconnected properties and then trying to come up with some hack, some promotion, some discount, something that will make them take be so kind to give you the money earlier than later. I hate that. So just figure out what is really urgent, what is something they really need to accomplish right now, and then ask yourself, does our product or service help with that? Can we be of service with that priority? And then, they're going to act with urgency because they have selfish reasons to do so.
All right, guys. Well, that's all we've got time for. Thank you again for attending, everyone. We're going to send out the recording to this webinar if there are parts that you missed. If you have follow-on questions, please direct them to us. So everyone, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.